So The Crossing. Started reading The Crossing when I was 16, and you know, the beginning has a scene. It's the scene in Billy's life where he is touched by the wolf. He sneaks out of the cabin before the sun comes up to see him. And he would do that on a regular basis as a child. And he would sneak out and go watch him dance and chase the elk through the snow in the moonlight. And you know that if just that scene alone kind of affects you as the reader. It makes you feel the same way about the wolves that Billy does, just with that scene alone. And that's how I felt my first time reading it. So I'm like, okay, cool, this is about the wolf. This is a story about the wolf. I went into The Crossing completely blind. I didn't know anything about it. And so that was a really cool way to start it. And then I was a very slow reader. Takes me months and months and months to read a book unless I audiobook it. So back in those days, I was one of those American kids that were pumped full of, you know, amphetamine salts from a very young age for their attention disorder problems. And I quit taking that shit for high school. I just told, you know, everyone that I wasn't going to take them because they made me fucking feel really tired and whatnot. So I was a really poor reader, really distracted and whatnot. So it's taken me a really long time to read The Crossing, but I was getting every last bit though. So I'm also a very attentive reader. I read every sentence and every paragraph multiple times just to make sure I understand it 100%. So, got to the part, there's a wolf on the ranch and she is killing the cattle. And you know, this is I think in the 30s or the 40s, I think is when the crossing takes place. And so this isn't a Yellowstone ranch. This is a ranch that a family lives on to survive, you know. A family that goes way back to the turn of the century, you know. And so they got to deal with this wolf problem, and wolves haven't been in the area in a really long time. They've been hunted to damn near extinction, and so they think it's a wolf that came up from Mexico. And they're trying to figure out how to catch it, and I think Billy's dad gets sick or something, and he can't help. And Billy really wants to be the one to find it. And that's about where I almost died. Literally, nothing to do with the book. I almost died. He caught the wolf. I'm pretty sure I got to the part where he caught the wolf. He figured out how to trap the wolf by setting the trap under the ashes in the cook fire, because she kept digging up the cook fires, Mexicans' cook fires, and caught her, tied one end of her to a tree, tied the other end to his horse, stretches her out so she can't move. All she can do is snap her jaws. He ties a stick around in her mouth, and he's got her captive. And it was just the way that struggle is written. Hey, the way that struggle is written is just so labor intensive, just so balls to the wall. Something so wild. Hey, down. So balls to the wall, just wild, and it's like an immature act. Billy wrangling this wolf because he wants to save it. Any adult that were to come along and see him doing this would whoop his ass, shoot the wolf right then and there, and probably send him to the loony bin. But it's something that you would do when you have the youthfulness, you know, of your heart and the truthfulness of your heart. So this young teenager, I Billy's 16. I too was 16 when reading this, and it just felt like something I had done in some way or would do. Maybe it's just Cormac Macarthy's writing. Everything seems like a good idea. And yeah, the way that struggle is written of the process he's got to go through to accomplish his goal, getting the wolf back to Mexico, is it's action-packed, to say the least. The way it's written is painful. It's beautifully written, but you can feel the pain. And the fact that Billy has the willpower to force himself to fucking do it it's fucking crazy, even for a fictional character. I mean, there's only one author that I know of that has the ability to make me look at a fictional character and think of and subconsciously kind of think of them as if they're real and actually lived. And so that was, I think, where I died. So let's talk about the death story. Let's talk about my imagination. Let's talk about Cormac Macarthy's imagination and how fucking powerful the human imagination is. See, the thing you gotta understand about the human imagination is that it is the most unique thing conceptually in the universe. Human imagination. The final frontier. Enter in the teenager. Another, I'm not trying to be funny here, but, one of the most uncontrollable and unharnessable energy sources imaginable in the human being form. Okay? I was, like I said, I was a morbid teenager. And I was really into tripping balls on hallucinogenics. And so that's what I was doing. Then you take the magic mushroom. Powerful. Another one of the most powerful things in the universe, because you can use it to make your imagination seem real. A human being takes the magic mushroom and it has the capability of making what they're imagining seem like reality. Physically and spiritually, it's a very powerful, mystifying thing. Took a bunch of shrooms. Took about 3/8 of shrooms in 3 bites. Just ate them way too fast. Then you take Cormac Macarthy, a human being who has utilized and harnessed the power of his imagination to the point that he can portray an imaginary event or an imaginary person and convey it to us in a way that our subconscious thinks it's real. And had a major meltdown, bad trip in this apartment complex, and left the apartment and kind of got lost, and I had a knife that I cut myself with by accident because I was tripping so hard. I was holding it by the blade, not aware that I was holding a knife, but I had initially taken it out because I was afraid for my life, because I was hallucinating beyond anything I was ever familiar with. And didn't hurt anybody. I did wander into the wrong apartment. And you take all that, you take those 3 components: mushrooms, Cormac Macarthy, the human imagination, and a teenager. And what do you get? You get a fucking explosion. Cops got called. Cops showed up. And I guess the cops weren't trained on how to deal with a crazy 16-year-old who doesn't understand their verbal commands and won't listen to them and doesn't know what the fuck they are. And, you know, long story short, you know, this video isn't really about that, it's about the crossing. So you get an explosion of humanity in its rawest form, which doesn't even resemble a human at all. That's why I related with the wolf, you see, because I was treated like a wild animal. For all intents and purposes, I kind of werewolfed out. And I'm not bragging about it, it's a shame. But, you know, I think I know what the berserkers were going for. Now that I have experienced just blind imagination. Having switched places with, you know, my conception of reality. It resulted in them chasing me around, wrestling with me, holding me down, getting me face down, handcuffing me, macing me while I was handcuffed. All the witnesses at the apartment reported them fucking kicking me and jabbing me, and just while I was handcuffed, had me face down in a flower bed, and I was like eating this lady's flowers. I was tripping so hard that once they got me subdued, I forgot I was even in a wrestling match, and I just started eating flowers. And yeah, and then and this cop sat on my back. I think they put the knee on your neck for a reason. That's because if they sit on your back while you're belly down with handcuffed, they're sitting on your lungs. And I had a full-grown adult sitting on my 16-year-old back, and you know, belly down and handcuffed with a fucking face full of mace, tripping on a fucking assload of mushrooms. See, I already had an active imagination, an overactive imagination, and to the point where me just being a moronic, depraved teenager, American teenager, I was drawn to Cormac Macarthy. By the last place you'd expect me to get anything from, which is a teacher. So, Cormac Macarthy, his writing, look out dude, you're stepping on a snake. Cormac McCarthy's writing is as powerful and strong and vivid as a mushroom trip. And that's a fact. I don't know, that's just my explanation. An explanation I tell myself of why I had such a bad trip. Because, you know, I missed out on a lot of good times. I missed out on a good chunk of my youth, you know. And it's like I felt like a huge punishment. And so, you know, I've come up with these little explanations of why that shit happened to me. And I don't blame Cormac McCarthy. You know, I don't blame Cormac McCarthy. I blame myself and my emotions. And you know, it almost smothered me to death. And then the ambulance showed up. My heart stopped on the ambulance. They had to defibrillate me. Then 4 days I kept waking back up. I was in a medically induced coma, because every time I was awake I was just tripping and psycho and hurting myself. And anyway, I came out of it 4 days later and had a little bit of brain damage. I had to learn to walk again. Had to learn to talk again, because I guess one of the side effects of psilocybin poisoning is your tongue swells up like the size of a baseball. It was swollen up so big I couldn't even close my teeth around it. And that was weird. I had to learn to talk again and learn to swallow food again. And I was like blind. I had like mushroom goggles. It's a very unfortunate character to identify with. The wolf in The Crossing. Identifying with that level of struggle and fight and fear and just desperate animal determination to evade the situation. You know, you don't want to know what that's like. You don't want to know what that feels like. I had a lot going on, and that book was amazing to be reading during it. It really was, because I had this journey to go on while I was going on my real journey of recovery and realization of I'm not special. Shit can happen even if you're a kid. People might try to kill you no matter what. You know, you just never know. And there was just a lot to process, and reading the Crossing at the same time was an adventure. And I would say it was fucking therapeutic, very therapeutic, because the rest of what takes place in that is a little bit of a blur, because I did get my vision back enough within a few months to read the rest of it on my own once I got out of the hospital. But you know, I remember he goes home and his damn family is killed, seemingly because he took the shotgun down to Mexico with him and they didn't have any protection, and because he didn't tell his dad about that Indian that was stalking their house. You know, there's a lot of guilt on his part, and I was feeling a lot of guilt on my part. He doesn't really talk about his guilt in the book, but there's no way he's not feeling guilty as hell. And I had guilt on my part because I look like such a douchebag to my parents, you know. I look like such an incredible ass. They wanted to charge me with so much stuff: resisting arrest, assault on a police officer, evading arrest because I had got away from them at one point, drug charges, breaking and entering. They wanted to fucking nail me to the barn. But everyone saw those cops almost fucking kill me, so that didn't happen. And I don't know, man. Maybe I was the wolf fighting the hounds. A 16-year-old boy with a head full of mushrooms, just a soul full of mushrooms, having attracted enough attention to wind up facing down a pack of cops. It's kind of like I was the wolf fighting the hounds, perhaps. It's like this. I was the wolf, the cops were the hounds, and society was the Mexicans that orchestrated such an event to take place. You know? I'm just rambling now. Yeah, and the rest of the book, it's a I wouldn't call it dark, but it's sad. It's the saddest book I've ever read because of the ending. I almost don't like the book because of the ending. The last paragraph, the last page or so, the last couple pages. Just because it's sad, I don't feel like art has to be sad. And yeah, Cormac Macarthy writes about tragedy and sad and bad and pain and violence, and we love to read about it. But I'm just to a point in either my old age or my evolution in my art perspective is it doesn't have to be bad. We know life is fucked up. But we've been depicting how fucked up it is and how unforgiving and unjustified it is, with all the sad, bad endings, with the good guy dying, the bad guy winning. Art's not for that, man. I don't think so. Documentation purposes, sure, but I think people need to start making some art with some happy endings. Some really deep, profoundly amazing, bigger than life stories like The Crossing, just with some happy endings. I feel like it'd be really healthy for the psyche, because the media we consume affects our psyche. No matter how strong-minded we think we are, what comes out of the screen, what comes out of the speakers, what's on the pages, it affects our psyche. And if only there was, it would, the road had a happy ending. So that's off the top of my head. That's at least one Cormac Macarthy book that had a happy ending. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it. When I talk about other McCarthy novels, it's not going to be about my first experience, because that's not the focus. It's just those 3 books are the 3 that are the closest to me, I guess, and that I'm the most familiar with. Another sad synchronicity in my life around that book was the fact that not long after all that went down and I got out of the hospital and everything, my brother moved away. He moved to Texas, and it was because life here was no good. Having almost watched me die, and the reason it was, and what I was like to be around and live with, he just set his sight for greener pastures. I don't know that he found them, but he at least went to where his heart was calling him, which was Texas. And so that's another thing I had in common with Billy. He lost his damn brother, not by death, but by separate ways, down in Texas. The story it's Mexico, but in my story it's Texas. And it's just one of those synchronicities that I was talking about, that you may realize that you have in common with a Cormac Macarthy novel or character. The human imagination, the only drug you'll ever need, the highest high you'll ever climb.